Skip every latte for 30 years and invest the money. You'd end up with $87,000. That's it. Meanwhile, one race negotiation could earn you triple that in a single afternoon. The latte factor is a lie. Here's the thing. This rule quietly keeps you broke, and most people don't realize why it's so misleading. You've heard it 1,000 times. Skip the $5 coffee. Pack your lunch. Cancel the streaming service you forgot. Do this for 30 years and somehow magically you'll retire a millionaire. It's the most repeated finance advice ever. It shows up in books, TikToks, morning shows, on the lips of every uncle with opinions about your spending. And almost none of it is actually true. Let me explain where this whole myth even came from. A financial author named David Bach published a book in the early 2000s telling a now famous story. A young woman saved nothing but spent $5 daily on coffee and muffins. So he ran the numbers. Invest that $5 instead at 11% a year for 40 years, she'd have $2 million. The phrase latte factor was born, and the internet did the rest. The gospel spread for 20 straight years. Every personal finance influencer repeated it. Small sacrifices, tiny choices, daily discipline. It sounded responsible. It sounded humble. It sounded like you, the average person, were finally in control. And nobody questioned it because it felt good. The message told you that wealth was a moral reward for tiny, virtuous behavior. And that's where it lied. If you want to understand how money really works, subscribe to Andy Explains Money for smarter money moves. Here's the thing. That framing is exactly why it spread. It turns money into a clean little morality play. If you're broke, you bought coffee. If you're rich, you didn't. It's tidy. It's lazy. It's perfectly shareable. It puts the entire weight of your financial life on a paper cup, letting everyone else off the hook. Your employer, your landlord, your insurance company, the whole system around you, all conveniently absolved of blame. The latte becomes the villain. You become the hero who just needs a little more willpower. Neat story. But the math behind that story doesn't survive contact with reality. Let me actually break this down for you. Take a real $5 coffee, every weekday, 250 days a year, year after year. That's $1,250 annually. Invest it at 7% after inflation, compound it steadily. Compound it for 30 straight years. Run the numbers honestly. You don't get 2 million. You don't get 1. You get closer to $126,000 in today's money. Sounds like a lot, right? Now, subtract taxes on those gains. Subtract fund fees.
Subtract that you won't be perfectly consistent 30 years. You're left with around $80,000 to $90,000 after 3 decades of saying no to coffee. That's not a fortune. That's a used car and a modest vacation. The famous $1 million promise uses tricks. It uses 11 or 12% returns, historical stock numbers, not what you actually keep after inflation.
It ignores taxes on dividends, capital gains, expense ratios. It assumes you never miss a single investing day. And it usually uses a daily expense higher than $5 to make the final figure sound massive. Run the same calculation with real-world numbers. Real returns, real taxes, real human consistency. The millionaire fantasy quietly evaporates. You're left with a modest cash pile and 3 decades of skipped coffee. Was it worth it? Probably not. And that's before we talk about what you actually lose. Because here's the part nobody really covers up front. The cost of latte factor thinking isn't just the missing million. It's the mental tax that quietly drains you daily. Most people don't realize how much energy micro-tracking burns. Every single purchase becomes a tiny moral decision. Should I get the sandwich? Should I make coffee at home? Should I split this lunch with a friend? You start running a small accounting firm inside your head, all day, every day.
Psychologists named this decision fatigue. Your brain has a daily budget of choices, and you burn it arguing over $4 coffees. There's nothing left for the moves that actually matter. asking for a raise, switching jobs, refinancing your loan. Picture a phone battery draining on background apps. By the time the big decision arrives, you're at 3%. And it gets worse. When your brain stays locked on small leaks, it narrows your whole worldview steadily. Behavioral economists call this scarcity mindset. You start making smaller bets, taking fewer risks, missing bigger opportunities. Because you're squinting at the price of yogurt. Then comes the rebound. You restrict, then crack. Eventually you snap. The impulsive weekend trip, the $400 Friday dinner. It's all just pure frugality theater now. You look disciplined on the surface, but the math underneath is a complete wash, every single time.
Meanwhile, the real leak is sitting somewhere else entirely. Want to know where? Here's the honest answer. Your money isn't leaking through the lid of your coffee cup. It's leaking through three doors: rent, car, insurance. Pull up your statements. Coffee costs $40 to $150 monthly. Rent runs $1,500 to $3,000. Your car, payment, fuel, insurance, maintenance, easily eats $800. Your insurance tech adds a few hundred more. Add them up. For most people, they swallow 70% of income. Coffee is a rounding error against that. Cut coffee in half, you save $60. Move to a smaller apartment across town, you save $500. Sell the financed SUV, buy a used economy car, free $400. Reshop your insurance yearly, save $200. $1,100 monthly from 3 decisions versus $60 from 1,000 tiny ones. The math is brutal. The latte-factor watches the small wallet. Real money lives in the big wallet. Gurus rarely send you there, because the big wallet requires harder conversations with a landlord, a partner, a dealership, an insurance company. Skipping coffee is easy. Moving apartments is not. But that's exactly where the smarter money moves actually live. And there's a second leak that the latte-factor completely ignores. It's called the income side, and it's massive.
You can only cut spending down to zero, but you can grow your income forever. One side has a floor. The other side has no ceiling at all. Yet 90% of financial advice you scroll past targets the floor side, because shaming people about coffee gets more clicks than teaching them how to actually negotiate a real raise at work. Here's what happens when you actually run the full 20-year projection. Let me introduce you to two very different people. Meet Frugal Frank and Strategic Sarah. Both earn $60,000 yearly. Same age, same city, same zero starting savings. Frugal Frank reads every latte-factor book on the shelf. He skips coffee. He brings tuna sandwiches into work daily. He cancels every subscription he can find. He saves an extra $150 monthly by being disciplined about pennies. He invests every dollar. But he keeps his income exactly the same for 20 straight years, ignoring all upside growth. He's so busy optimizing the grocery bill, he never once thinks about the much bigger income picture above him. Strategic Sarah drinks her coffee. She buys lunch sometimes. She has a few streaming services. She does not optimize pennies. But once a year, every single year, she does one thing Frank never does. She has the conversation. With her boss or with a new employer. She negotiates. She asks for the raise. She moves jobs strategically every 3 or 4 years. On average, her income climbs 4% yearly, sometimes raises, sometimes job changes, just steady. Now fast forward 20 years. Frugal Frank, with all his disciplined saving, ends up with around $75,000 total, maybe $80,000 on a really good day. Decent, honest, earned the hard way, through 2 decades of skipped lattes. Strategic Sarah, by year 20, earns around $130,000 instead of $60,000, saving the same percentage. She's stacked away well over $300,000, possibly closer to $400,000, depending on market timing. The gap between Frank and Sarah isn't lattes,
It's $250,000, and she still drank her coffee. Here's the part the latte-factor never tells you. The highest return move under 40 isn't cutting, it's growing income. A $10,000 raise, compounded by future raises, is worth $200,000 to $400,000 over a career. Even if you spend most of it, the gap with someone who never negotiates is enormous. One uncomfortable conversation, one afternoon, one email. That's the actual lever, not a paper cup. So, what do you do Monday morning? Here's a counter thesis. The real game isn't looking wealthy, it's becoming wealthy. Those two things pull in opposite directions. Looking wealthy is a leased car, a bigger apartment, a watch you don't need. Becoming wealthy is boring. It's savings rate, it's automation, it's negotiation. Systems, not willpower. Research keeps landing on the same conclusion. The biggest predictor of long-term wealth, more than income, more than peaks, more than timing, is savings rate. The percentage you don't spend. Save 5% of a high income, often poorer than someone saving 20%. The ratio matters more than the raw number. That's the truth most people don't realize about real wealth.
Forget the latte, forget moral theater. Pick a real percentage, 20% classic, 10 starting, 25 if catching up. Build a system hitting that number automatically before you see the money. One move replaces 1,000 guilt acts. Willpower is unreliable. Automation is permanent. The latte-factor demands a virtuous choice 365 days a year. A direct deposit splitter asks one choice once, forever. Which one do you actually think works? Be honest. Now the framework that actually moves the needle. Here's a 5-step system. Simple, boring, effective, and underrated. Nobody puts this on a thumbnail because it doesn't promise $1 million from a coffee cup. Step 1. Audit the big three. Rent or mortgage, transportation, insurance. Total what you spend, then ask one question. Could it be 20% lower without ruining your life? Smaller apartment. Selling the car you can't actually afford.
Or shopping your insurance every 12 months instead of letting it auto-renew at higher rates each cycle.
One afternoon auditing the big three frees up more money than 5 entire years of skipping your morning coffee. Step 2. Automate savings. Pick your number, 20% for most. Set an automatic transfer for payday. It moves out of checking the same day, into retirement, into a brokerage, into a high-yield savings account. Order matters less than the automation. The point is the money leaves before you can ever spend it. You're not relying on discipline anymore. You're relying on a system. That's how smarter money moves actually happen. Step 3. Grow income on a schedule. Once a year, every single year, you do the thing. Either negotiate a raise with documentation of your contributions or interview elsewhere to see what the market actually pays. Even if you don't take that offer, you now have a number. That's leverage you didn't have yesterday. Workers who change jobs every 3 years tend to out-earn those who stay by a meaningful margin. This isn't disloyalty, this is math. The labor market quietly rewards people who keep their options open. Step 4. Build a guilt-free spending category. This is exactly the part the latte preachers always miss. Sustainable money systems have room for joy. Decide in advance what you spend on the things you genuinely love. Coffee, concerts, travel, a nicer phone, whatever it is. Build it into your budget and spend without guilt. The rest of the budget tightens around it. Stop white-knuckling small purchases and you stop binging on big ones. Step 5. Track net worth, not coffee receipts. Once a month, write what you own and what you owe. Subtract one from the other. That's your net worth. Watch that number over years, not over days or weeks. It moves slowly at first, then faster. This single habit replaces every spreadsheet, every category breakdown, every guilt session.
You're playing a long game now, so score it like one. That's the whole framework, clean and simple. Audit big costs, automate savings, grow income, spend guilt-free on what you love, track net worth monthly. Notice what's not in there. Nothing about coffee, nothing about avocado toast, nothing about packing your lunch. None are wrong. If you love home coffee, great. If a daily lunch is your daily highlight, also great.
But neither one is the lever. The lever is structural, and structure is what actually changes the math. One more thing the average investor still gets wrong. Ever wonder why finance gurus keep selling the latte myth? Honest answer, because it's simple, it sells books, and it makes people feel powerful for 5 whole seconds. Telling you to skip coffee is way easier than telling you that your job badly underpays you. Easier than admitting your apartment costs too much or your car is a debt trap on wheels. Easier than saying your insurance is overpriced. Honestly, those truths just don't fit on a YouTube thumbnail. Here's the thing, there is a real business model underneath. Disciplined content is infinite, endlessly repeatable, endlessly sellable. Another expense to cut, another habit to fix, another planner template to buy and download next week. Structural advice is finite. Audit the big three, automate your savings, and there's almost nothing left to sell. The latte-factor is basically a subscription product dressed up as ancient financial wisdom for the masses. But I'm not telling you the whole system is rigged and you're powerless. The exact opposite actually. The levers are real. They live in your rent, your car, your career, savings rate, and net worth. Those are the real moves, not the muffin. So next video on this channel, we tackle housing. Because rent versus buy, big city versus small, house hacking versus traditional ownership, that math moves real wealth. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in net worth. A decision made well once is worth 10,000 lattes. Before you go though, one smarter move actually worth 10,000 lattes if you remember nothing else. Stop asking yourself what small thing you can cut. Start asking what big thing you can change. Audit your rent, audit your car, audit your insurance. Then automate at least 20% of every paycheck. Schedule one income conversation per year.
Track your true net worth, not the daily coffee shop receipts. And spend guilt-free on small joys, because real life is supposed to include a coffee now and then. Real wealth and looking wealthy aren't the same game. Latte advice teaches you to play small and feel virtuous. The framework I just gave you teaches you to play structural, feel free, and actually build real wealth. One path leaves you tired, virtuous, and only $70,000 richer after 30 long latte-skipping years of denial. The other leaves you energetic, free, and several $100,000 richer in just 20 years. You pick. If you want to make smarter money moves with no hype, subscribe to Andy Explains Money for clear breakdowns. Next video, we tear into the real math behind housing, rent versus buy, and when each one wins. Most people pick the wrong one for the wrong reasons, and the difference can cost you a fortune. Until then, drink the coffee, run the system, and remember,